Okay, we're holding Hot Shabbat. For those of you who were not here for the introduction, this is the third part of a very important series, Fundamentals of a Jewish Home. Yesodot Habayit Yehudi, which we began about 5 months ago. There are three important areas. One is the dietary laws, the Hot Kashrut, what we can put into our mouth, what we cannot. One needs to know how to identify that which is kosher. The second area is the area of family purity, Tarat HaMishpacha. And the third area is the area dealing with the laws of Shabbat. These are called the fundamentals because you are able to recognize a Jew. He's observant or not, he practices Judaism, he practices the area. Many of you have heard of the famous question, who is a Jew? Which they're still debating today in the Knesset, they can't figure it out. In reality, what they should be asking is, what is a Jew, not who is a Jew? Because once you know what a Jew is supposed to be, then it wouldn't be difficult to recognize one. Basically, a Jew is not only if his mother is Jewish, which only makes him biologically Jewish. In the morning, the men say, blessing, Shalom Asani God. We're very proud that we were not made Gentiles. One can only say that blessing with pride and be happy about it. He is different than a Gentile. Not only because he's circumcised, but in some way, his life is conducted differently, according to certain values that are established in the Torah. So these three important areas, including Shabbat, basically will let you know, will tell you if one is Jewish or not. Does one observe it or not? There are a lot of people out there, of course, who are ignorant. We're not talking about them because it's not their fault. But nowadays, that communication is so strong, and books have been translated in so many languages, and the world has become a small place, ignorance is not anymore a good excuse. One has the responsibility to get himself schooled in what Judaism is before attempting to study other philosophies and other religions. Especially when one considers that this is something that his parents or grandparents gave their life for. As I've spoken about it in the family purity laws in Russia, during the communist rule, when many of the mitzvot were banned and outlawed, anybody that was taught risked the danger of being exiled to Siberia. Nevertheless, many Jews risked their lives. The women went to the mikveh, even if they had to walk many kilometers, even if they had to immerse themselves in the cold, icy waters of the river. Many boys were circumcised because their parents did not want to have a child who was uncircumcised. So our forefathers gave their lives for these votes, especially Shabbat, Tarat HaMishpacha, and also Kashrut, even though during the Holocaust many people did not have anything to eat, and it was allowed for them to eat that which was not kosher. However, they were willing to wait and be patient and not put into their mouth something which was not kosher. These are therefore very important halachot, and that's why I chose these three areas. But especially Shabbat, which is going to take the longest one, there are many details. People get confused and they think Shabbat is difficult. It's not so difficult to observe. The only difficulty is keeping in mind all the details, the halachot. Therefore, one who reviews the halachot on a regular basis refreshes his memory and knows what is right and what is wrong. Just to go back on the most important point of the introduction of Shabbat is that what is prohibited on Shabbat is not necessarily physical labor. It is the 39 melachot, 39 functions or jobs that were present in the Mishkan during the construction of the tabernacle. In order to have a tabernacle, which was a mini temple when the people were in the desert, certain functions needed to be performed in order to construct the structure, in order to put together the garments. The garments were made with a variety of colors. The colors were extracted from herbs. And therefore, a lot of the melachot that we're going to be discussing either have to do with how to deal with all these items. In other words, what one can do and what one cannot do on Shabbat as far as the herbs, as far as getting these herbs, extracting the color from them. Or, as I said, the other opinion, the other commentaries hold that many of the jobs of the functions were to, for example, bake bread. In order to bake bread, you needed to plow the field, sow, to harvest, and to grind, bake, and so forth. So many of the functions were to accomplish one specific item that was present in the Mishkan. So these 39, the rabbis tell us, are the ones that constitute the Avot Melacha, Avot meaning the major categories of work, but each Av has Toladot, has descendants. Toladot meaning similar functions, similar jobs that are also prohibited, just like the main category. Today we're holding with Koser. We'll be doing three: Koser, Me'amer, and Dash. Some of them, as I said before, are more relevant than others. So you may not have a field, and this may not be too relevant to you, but you will see how it can be relevant. How some of the things that we take for granted are similar and may be prohibited. So let's begin with Koser. Koser means in English reaping. When it applies to the field, one would reap the stalks of wheat or whatever other crop that he's harvesting, and it's not ready to eat yet. What has to be done after it's reaped? Anybody know what comes after reaping? le'amer. Everything is put into bushels or bundles, after which there is dash. Dash meaning threshing. The process of removing all the chaff, all the straw. All we want is the grain. Today there are machines called combines. They do several functions, I think 5 or 6 functions together, all at the same time. And they're able to process a lot of wheat in a very short time, something that would have taken many hours of manpower. So koter means to remove something from its natural growth, from where it is growing. It doesn't have to be wheat, it could be flour too. And koter involves, or includes also koter, tolesh, or koter, picking, uprooting, or cutting. Pick an apple from the tree, even though you're not reaping it. It's a form of koter. The one who has trees in his backyard, well, guess what? You cannot pick whether it's apricots or oranges. It's the same thing. It will be a form of koter, or uprooting something from the ground. Last week when we talked about choresh, we talked about weeds. Removing weeds can be a form of choresh because it's helping the ground, but it's also a form of koter. By uprooting it from the ground, that would also not be permissible. Or any type of cutting off a branch. All of this would be similar to koter and would not be permissible. I included here something very interesting that many of you perhaps would not have thought of. I was totally unaware of it until I came across it, and that is removal of moss. Anybody here know what moss is? M-O-S-S? It looks like seaweed. It's green, it's thick, it grows on stones, especially in humid places, or on trees, on the bark of the tree. Green. Okay? In Hebrew it's called tahab. So there's an opinion that holds pretty much, since that is its place of growth, it would be not permissible to just remove it, because that's where it's growing. Just thought that it would be. Removing or uprooting also applies to pitriyot, mushrooms. Even though it may not be very much attached to the ground, it's still a form of koter. Another interesting one is anybody who has ever grown or has ever had bean sprouts in a jar, whether it was in a science class or elsewhere when you fermented, and how they begin to grow. Once they're beginning to grow, you cannot remove them from the water. Just like last week I explained what hydroponic was. Hydroponic is a system of growing vegetables on water. Similarly, you cannot remove it from the water because that is where it's receiving its nutrients or its nourishment from, and it will be a form of koter. We spoke about also the various differences between atzitz menukav and atzitz lo menukav, a flower pot that has a hole beneath it or does not have a hole beneath it. The one that has the hole is the most problematic because anytime a flower pot has a hole, it is absorbing or drawing its nutrients from the ground, even if it's a few feet up in the air. Somehow, physically, it is able to draw from the ground, so you would not be able to remove it from one spot to another spot, from one corner in the room to another corner, because of the hor, because of the menukab, it has a hole. If it's not menukab, it's not so much of a problem. So the problem with koter at least would be if it has a hole. This would be most likely in the East Coast or in those areas where they have maple trees. You know how they draw the syrup? Some say that would also be a form of koter because you are removing something from the tree. So that would also be a form of koter. The one that's the most common, the most relevant nowadays is cutting your nails. Cutting your nails, cutting your hair. And obviously there are differences in the halakha, and we may get to it a little bit later when we discuss the additional rabbinic prohibitions. Remember, the rabbis did not change the Torah, they did not add anything of their own. They put up fences in order to protect the laws of the Torah. They said, don't do this because you may forget and do what is really prohibited. So the real issur is, of course, doing something which you ordinarily do with the original tool. You cut your nails with scissors or with clippers. Is that what they call them, those things? Nail clippers? Or what if you just cut it off with your finger or you bite them? It's not the same. Obviously, it's not prohibited in the same way, but it's also not allowed. You may not do so. Right, but there are situations where the nail is hanging loose and you're very much in pain where you may be able to remove it. And there are situations, as we discussed in the past, that even though what you are not allowed to do, you're not allowed to go to do, a woman needs to go to the mikveh Friday night. Part of preparation of going to mikveh is cutting her nails, cleaning her nails. And it's already after she lit candles, she is allowed to ask the nun to cut her nails off. So that would be permissible. There are situations where that would be okay. But ordinarily, one has to be careful with his nails. It's always best to cut your nails on Thursday or Friday, so you should not have to come to or be tempted to cut your nails on Shabbat. Because it's a form of koter, or cutting. Because she's going to the mikveh, and one of the necessities of going to the mikveh for a woman, one of the things that she does to prepare herself, besides washing herself and making sure she has no knots in her hair, is to cut the nails, so there should be no hatzitzot. In other words, there should be nothing separating the water from her. And there might be dirt on the nails. It is customary for women to cut their nails before going to the mikveh. So you cannot do that after she lit candles. It's already Shabbat for her. And even though you usually do not ask the Goy to do something for you that you cannot do, there are situations where the rabbis allowed us to ask the Goy, and that is one, for the purposes of going to the mikveh. Alright, now we come to the most interesting part, also very relevant, that many people are unaware of. That even though all of these things are related to Koser, and they may be asum midoraita, according to the Torah, there are certain things that are prohibited by rabbinic decree because they may lead to, only because they may lead to transgress the original prohibition. And one of them is using the use of a tree. I just called it shimush be'et, the use of a tree, because there are quite a few halachot. What do I mean by the use of a tree? You cannot climb a tree, that's first of all. You can't climb a tree on Shabbat. There's nothing wrong with climbing the tree. There's no isur midoraita, you're not doing anything. Well, what may happen if you climb a tree? You might break a branch, you might want to pick a fruit. Right? There's also, there are many things that you may not do intentionally, that's something else. Yeah, we're not even talking about doing something unintentionally. That's called davar she'eino mitaveh. For example, remember last week we spoke about walking on grass. Even though you may be pulling the grass, you don't intend to do that. You're allowed to walk. If it happens, it happens. You didn't intend to cut grass as you're walking through it, so it's permissible to walk on grass. The only thing you have to be careful of is not walking on anything which is very, very soft or brittle that may easily break. But otherwise, there's no problem because you don't intend to do it. Here's the part where you actually may eventually do something that is prohibited. When the rabbi says, we're putting up a fence. Beyond this point, you don't go. We're concerned you might come to do a melacha d'oraita, and you have no business on a tree anywhere in Shabbat. But sometimes we may have a need to be on a tree on Shabbat. Anybody know? Can you think of an idea of why somebody would want to go up a tree on Shabbat? Yeah, to rescue a pet, bring down a child. You left your book up there. Yeah, the rabbi talked about a shofar. You need a shofar. You left it on the tree. You left the sidur on the tree. Well, guess what? You can't bring it down. So the isur of shimush hana'es was intended for only because you may come to do something which is prohibited, associated with koser, which is either breaking off a branch, taking a root, and therefore you cannot use the tree. Not using the tree therefore means what? Not climbing on it, not leaning against it, not sitting on it, or not putting a swing on it and using the swing. Because even though the swing is not the tree, the swing is directly on the tree. What the rabbis did allow is if you had a nail on the tree already, you're allowed to put your hat on it or remove your hat or something like that because that's already not directly on the tree itself. If you have a basket hanging on a nail, and the nail is on the tree, right? So you have something on top of something which is on the tree, you want to remove something from that basket, your coat is hanging on a nail. Right, it's on the tree, that would be permissible. But to use the tree itself in any form, or to use something which is on the tree, is not allowed to be midrabanan, only by rabbinic decree, because you may come. There's always that possibility you may come to do something which is doing. Right? Right, obviously, if it's a situation where somebody is in danger, has to go to the rescue and the like, then you will be able to bring him down. Somehow, you have him come down or get some help getting down. Yeah. Because this is only midrabanan, and obviously if there's a great need, it would be permissible. But yeah. Approximately, not necessarily, because, for example, removing the green sprout from the water, that is similar, but it may not be exactly the same as the real koser, or removal of the moss. That's just an opinion that brings this down. Whether it's exactly like koser or not, we don't know, but it definitely resembles. That's why I included it. Yeah, you're right. Many of these can be toladot, because they resemble the original melacha, which is koser. Toladot meaning functions that resemble the original category of words which is prohibited. Like picking a fruit, cutting the branch, it's like reaping, even though it's not using the same tools and it's not exact same process, but it's similar. Yeah. Alright, just like shimush ba'etz is the proper use of the tree, so is riding on a horse. You have a horse, you can't ride on a horse. Now this leads to another area called pets, which I don't want to get into right now, but if you have questions, I'll briefly answer them. Pet is okay. You're allowed to even walk your dog outside, holding onto the leash if you have one. As long as you don't hold too much of the leash in your hand, you just hold the edge. But anyway, the only problem with pets is muktzeh. You can't just handle them. But your pets, your animals, you're allowed to feed them. You're allowed to take care of your animals. You can't take care of animals that are not yours. That's extra tircha, extra work on Shabbat. To the edge of the leash. Because all that is, that's not carrying, because it's just the edge, right? If more of the edge would be in your hand, like you would be carrying it. But anyway, let your dog walk by himself. If you can, animals are muktzeh. You have anything which you have no direct use for in Shabbat is muktzeh, including an animal. Right? Yeah. The rabbi
say that the only thing you should not have is an aggressive vicious dog and attacking them. That you should not have in your home. So from that we infer that there's no prohibition, there's nothing wrong with having a pet, whether it's a dog or a cat or a fish or a bird. Yeah, I only have a problem with people who have no kids and only want to have dogs. That's already a problem. But if you have a family of kids and you want to have a dog, so you will not find that most Orthodox families have dogs. You know why? Because they have enough of a burden already. They don't need more worries. Imagine you want to go on vacation, you got to worry about your dog now too. You know, you have enough troubles and enough to be an observant Orthodox Jew is not easy, right? And it involves many responsibilities. And to have a pet is just another responsibility. So most of them don't have. Some do. No, they don't have to. No. They're unclean. In other words, you have to wash your hands if you're going to pray. So you have to be clean from anything that is unclean, but it's not tum'ah. Yes. All I know is that the dog is a man's best friend. So I don't know about angels. So they're good friends. As far as having a watchdog, Mrs. Love can do a better job. Okay, we're going to get to that. That's for later on. Okay. So why can't you ride a horse? Because of the similar problem, you may come to cut or to chop part of the tree that you might need for the horse. Since you are high, you're riding high on the horse, you may come to do that. So all these are preventative, just preventative. There's no real issue. You're not really doing anything that is prohibited on Shabbat, except the Rabbanat. No. So that once they prohibited something, they did not make a distinction. Whether you're in the desert or you're in a forest. Okay, smelling. Are you allowed to smell flower or fruit that's growing? If it's a flower, no problem. You can smell it. If it's a fruit, you should not smell it, because if it's a fruit, what is mostly fruit for? For eating. And if you smell it, you may come to take it. Flowers are usually we do not eat flowers, right? Flowers are for smelling. That's what they are, or for beauty. So if you smell, we're not afraid, the rabbis were not concerned, you may come to cut a flower and take it with you. And that's what they said, you know what, it's okay to smell flowers, but it's not a good idea to smell fruit. Obviously, I'm talking something which is not detached, something which is still attached to the ground. These are all midrabbanan. By rabbinic decree, the rabbi said, you know what, we want to keep you out of trouble. We don't want you to come to transgress the prohibition of the Torah of picking a fruit. So don't smell the fruit. How about fruits that have already fallen to the ground on Shabbat? That is a whole different area. That's called nolad, something that was born on Shabbat, something that came about on Shabbat. It has to do with mukte, so we won't talk about it right now. But I will say that if the fruit did fall before Shabbat, you're certain about that, it's permissible to pick up. But if it falls on Shabbat, we cannot move it. And we'll talk about that, what problem with that is when we get to the Zalachot of Nolad and mukte. No, nothing to do with our time either. There is an opinion, believe it or not, that holds that removing a fish from the ocean is also a form of kosher, because that's where he lives. But in reality, there's other problems with that. You're killing, right? So that is another prohibition, a different problem. But some say it also can be included in kosher. Okay, I think we can go on to Melachot. This is a real small one. Me'amer, gathering. It's prohibited to gather all that has fallen, for example, all the fruits, all the crops into bushels, putting together where they are growing. That includes also putting it into a basket. Putting a whole bunch of fruits into a basket, or gathering them all together in bundles or in a big pile, is a suit. It's called me'amer. That would be the next step of what they would do in the field after they reap the stalks. They would put them in bushels, in bundles, and that would be a surah. A similar prohibition is found in figs. How do you do me'amer with figs? You put them into the string. You know how they put them all into a string? That would not be permissible. And similarly, some say you should be careful not to put the beads, even though beads are not food. It's not the same problem, but one should not do that on Shabbat either. To put them into a string, just like you don't put the figs into a string. So me'amer basically involves bundles, putting a lot of fruits into a basket, the figs into a string, or the alim, the leaves, piling them all up to be used as fertilizer. Obviously, if you're just removing leaves because it's garbage, it's something else. You have to be careful not to remove all the leaves or to clean up your yard, because as we said last week, that is a form of choresh, of cleaning up the yard. In preparation of plowing, all the debris is removed. But here the problem would be piling it all up in one place. It's called me'amer. That would not be permissible. The last one is, I think, the most significant one because there are quite a few halachot that are included in dash. From dash itself, you may not suspect that there is, but there is quite a bit. Dash means threshing. The way they used to do the threshing was they used to have use the special tools, or they would bang on the stalks of wheat, and that would remove the straw and leave behind only the grain, the kernels. That's all that we were interested in. So that would be the next step. After we plowed the field, we seeded it, the field, we're reaping the stalk, we are putting it in bundles, or we're putting it all together. Now it has to be dust, there has to be a threshing to remove the grain. So this is prohibited. Also, if you have a field, you can't do any dash. You cannot remove the kernels from the stalks. Now don't get confused between this and another melacha called borer. Borer, which we eventually will cover, is removing that which you do not desire from that which you do desire. Borer applies when there is a mixture, and you remove one and you don't remove the other one. Here, you still have the two. You're just breaking them apart. You see the difference? It's similar, but it's not the same. And it's quite different in many ways. For example, in borer, sometimes borer may be permissible if you're going to eat it right away. And we'll talk about it when we speak about borer. Here there's no permission of, you can do dash if you're going to eat it right away. So dash is, you still have the two. You did not separate one from the other necessarily. You're basically breaking up the two. You're taking one out of the other, but you still have it there. Whereas with borer, you're removing one from the entire mix. And borer is mostly with food, but it could be with other items as well. Where does dash come into play in the kitchen? With ahuna. There's something called mefarek. Mefarek means to extract or to remove the peas from the pea pods. And that cannot be done on Shabbat if the pea pods are completely dry and unedible. You intend to throw it away. As opposed to sweet peas, sugar peas, the pod, we eat the pod. It's edible, it's fresh, it's green. So there's no problem. You can take out the peas and eat them separately if you want. That would not be dash. But regular pea pods, like the ones that the manufacturers use when they package the beans and the bean cans, so they throw away all these pea pods, right? That we would not be able to do on Shabbat. We would not be able to break up the pea pod and take out the pea pod. Unless the pea pod itself was edible and was going to be, that would be a form of dash called mefarek. Mefarek meaning that we are removing or extracting the pea from its pod. The same is true with a walnut. When it's growing on a tree, it has a hull or a big shell. That is thrown away. That does not protect the inside, it just protects the inner shell. It would be a problem to remove that on Shabbat. Okay, we're going to get to that. That's another 2 minutes. Okay, actually a few more minutes. So anything which is a form of mefarek, which is a tolada or similar to dash, would be prohibited. Where do we see it other than with peas? In the area of milking. Now, before we talk about a cow's milk, let's talk about moms. Many women want to nurse their babies, and they should. They say that, of course, mother's milk is better than anything else in the market. However, sometimes a mother may have a reason to express her milk. And some do it by hand, some use pumps. On Shabbat is a problem if you're expressing directly into a keli, into a cup. That's a form of mefarek. Removing the milk, the mother's milk, if it's not going directly into the baby's mouth, she's not nursing, she cannot express. On Shabbat, a woman wants to express and save milk. She's a working mother, she's a teacher, right? I remember my wife, that's what she would do. She would save up, express. Lots of milk every day and put away in the freezer, right? Then, whoever would be babysitting the baby would come and thaw the milk and warm it up a little bit, give it to the baby. And she had, Baruch Hashem, she had enough. It wasn't easy. It's not easy to express. It leaves bruises too. But that was the only way that she can arrange that the baby should continue to have as much as possible mother's milk and not Similac. Or what's the other one? What's the other brand? I don't want to be advertising in just the one brand, huh? How did you know? Yeah. Baruch Hashem. Yeah. Anyway, all of these may be good, but they're not a substitute. They're not as good a substitute for mother's milk. So they would express. Expressing cannot be done on Shabbat. It's a form of mefarek. Good question. See, there's somebody listening. What if the mother is in pain? What do we do then? She's allowed to express as long as it's wasted. Yeah. As long as it's wasted. The same, or if she doesn't do it in the cup directly, and if she does do it in the cup, maybe she should put something in the cup that was spoiled in it. In other words, if she's in pain, that's the right thing to do, is to waste it. And that's partly what a farmer, a Jewish farmer, would need to do with his cows. You cannot milk your cow on Shabbat for similar reasons. But cows sometimes you need to release them of the milk. So there are quite a few details on how to handle a farm. We don't have the time to get into all the details on how to handle this business with cows, but similarly, you would be able to do something which would be permissible, as long as you don't commercialize it and use it and benefit from it. Yes. Right. There are certain ways that the milking of cows can be arranged. I'm not sure what they do, and I cannot say that they're doing everything properly, correctly, but as long as you do not directly benefit from it, as long as it's done perhaps with a shinui, in a different way, not the ordinary way, and especially if there's a need, if the animal's in pain, it can be done. The question is how to do it. There are quite a few details. All right, the typical dash also involves cotton and flax, which has seeds that need to be removed. Somebody were to bang these things to remove the seeds of that which you do not want from it, to make it clean, so you can process it. That would also be a form of dash. Okay, klipata perot, which you were asking about. So what's the difference between removing a shell from a peanut, pistachio, or anything else? Bananas and oranges. Isn't that a form of dash? You're removing that which you do not want from that which you do want. Just like perhaps with the peas. But it's not the same. Because with all these other items that are a form of dash, generally speaking, when do you remove it? Even in the field. The threshing happens or occurs in the field. The other peels are intended to be with the fruit until the moment you're about to eat it, because of freshness. So they are protected. See the big difference here? So the peel of a fruit, or even a peanut, is there for a different reason, and it's not removed earlier. And because of that, there's no problem with removing peels or fruit or nuts, especially if you're going to eat it right away. So there would not be a problem with regular fruit. Anybody ever see a honeycomb? Yeah. To remove the honey from it on Shabbat would also not be permissible. Also a form of dash or mefarek. Now we come to the most difficult part. Are you ready? You have to be very awake for this one. Huh? That's no problem. Yeah, it's just removing the honey from the honeycomb. And you can put a slice of bread next to it, but you cannot remove it. Okay, the next one, pay close attention to, because that's the one that's the most relevant, the most common, and the most important one perhaps over here. They're all important, but this one, and perhaps the mother's milk, applies every Shabbat. Can you make orange juice? How about tomato juice? How about apple juice? How about lemon juice? Right? Do you see why this is important? Because we all like juice, and we all occasionally do squeeze the fruit to make juice. Oh, lemon, right? Right? So this happens all the time. So we need to know what the halakha says about this. That's what we're going to talk about now. Okay. The rabbis tell us that anavim vezetim asur min Torah, to squeeze. You cannot squeeze grapes or olives to extract their juice according to the deen of Torah. The Torah prohibited extracting this drink as a form of dash. You're separating that which you want from that which you do not want, that which you're going to discard. Right. No, I didn't say that. I said to make oil from olives or to make wine or grape juice from grapes is a asur min Torah. Therefore, the rabbis tell us that even if the wine, the juice, flows by itself, right? You have a whole bunch of grapes or olives sitting on each other, the yain zab is flowing, it may be a problem. You may not be able to use it on Shabbat. And that's the reason I say you may not be able, because it all depends if you put it underneath the press before Shabbat, or if it's out of the coming out on Shabbat. But basically, the rabbi said you cannot use that which flows by itself, because you may come to, especially if these are intended for drink, they're intended for you want the juice, so you're very happy that it's flowed, so you may want some more. If the fruits would only be eaten and not used for the juice, we would not have this problem. But because many fruits are squeezed for their juice, even if it flows by itself, it may be a problem. So that is only true midin Torah by grapes and olives. The rabbis came along and said that there are certain fruits, like rimonim in their time, like pomegranates, that people would sometimes make juice from it. Today maybe not as much, but in those days, yes. And because people would tend to make juice from it, it would not be permissible midrabanan to take a fruit which people make juice from and squeeze it out on Shabbat. Well, guess what? today is many fruits are used to make juice, including tomatoes, including carrots. Yeah, carrots is quite difficult to make juice with your hands, right? But just about any fruit that you can think of, even strawberries, because many fruits are used for juice, all those fruits that we know that are regularly used for juice, we cannot squeeze them on Shabbat to make juice from. Therefore, a fruit like a melon or a watermelon, which most people do not make juice from, if you would want to squeeze it, it will be okay. That's fine. I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to lemon juice. Okay, so that's basically the basic rule of squeezing juice. If fruits are used to make juice, then you would not be able to squeeze it on Shabbat. By the way, what berachah do you make on the juice? Jackal, according to most opinions, because it's no longer the fruit in its original state. Now the rabbis tell us that even though you're not allowed to squeeze the fruit to make juice, if you want to squeeze the fruit al tafshil al ma'achal acher, to spice up or to add flavor to some other dish, I'll get the lemon juice soon, you're allowed to do it. So according to the Sephardic tradition, you can even do that even with grapes and olives. You would be able to squeeze them into a dish. Ashkenazim are much stricter about using grape even for squeezing into other food. But everybody agrees that you're allowed to squeeze just about any fruit, other than grapes at least and olives, into a dish, into a salad. The big issue is with lemons. According to the Sephardic tradition, it is permissible for you to even make lemonade. Why? Because lemonade is not just like any other juice. Lemons are not necessarily only used for juice, to extract the juice. You mix it with sugar and you add the lemon to water, right? You don't drink it by itself. So that opinion holds you would be able to squeeze lemon into water. Then it's best not to make the juice just by itself. But if you're squeezing it into water, into sugar, that would be the best way to do it, as opposed to squeezing it first into the keli, a whole bunch of it, then adding the water. That's next. Okay? So if you're squeezing lemon juice into water, for Sephardic tradition, there's no problem. Ashkenazim are a little bit wary of that too. Because today, lemon juice is so common and such a favorite, so popular, that it's almost like a drink in itself. They make jars and jars of just lemon juice. So some Ashkenazim may not use the lemon for lemon juice. But everybody would agree that you can squeeze it into a salad, onto fish, and if you're a Sephardic, you can even squeeze it onto your tea. Because what's the difference between that and a lemon juice? But Ashkenazim would not even squeeze it into a tea, if they're the ones who are strict about it. But again, lemon, you can see the difference. Lemon is not exactly like the other fruit. Nevertheless, it all depends on what today the situation is. Are they using it a lot? What's the status of this fruit? If they make a lot of juice from it, then you would not be able to squeeze it. So the idea of squeezing it onto food is that you're not making a juice from it. We're not concerned, right? As with the other concern that if it flowed by itself, you may come to squeeze it. Because to squeeze it over food, you're just sweetening the food or the dish, and that's permissible. That's just like food with food. Then you have fushim. Let's say you have a real oily latke, or a real oily steak, or anything which has a lot of liquid in it. Can you squeeze out the liquid? You know how sometimes you put a paper towel on something which is very oily to absorb the oil? So if that's all you want to do is to get rid of, you don't want to separate the water, the juice from these vegetables that have been pickled. Vegetables have been pickled, right? Or meat has absorbed, or a lot of oil or water. All you want to do is eliminate or get rid of this liquids. That's permissible, because you're not separating it, so you're just getting rid of something that you do not want. Okay, so that will be permissible. Another point is putting a grape into your mouth, or a olive that you were talking about. It would be permissible if you're putting it into your mouth and squeezing it in your mouth, because that's not exactly the same as squeezing it directly into a cup. Is that what you were asking about? What about it? Right. What's the question? Right, after you put it into your mouth, you can take out the pit. That's a question of whether you're allowed to make borer, remove a pit from an olive. I thought you were going to ask about the squeezing it into your mouth. It's not a problem so much. Yeah, that's okay. Right. Yeah, right. Well, the problem, you can squeeze it, because what you're doing is eliminating that which you do not want, which does not belong there to begin with. It's not part of the fruit. It's not part of the it just absorbs or soaks something. This is as opposed to the following that we will be talking about, and that is wringing or squeezing a cloth or a towel, which is completely different. But the mushim itself are not the same as fruits. This is not their real juice. You're just eliminating something which you do not want, which was not there to begin with. It was just absorbed. That would be permissible as long as you do not squeeze it for the water. All you're doing is squeezing it out because you just want to keep, whatever it is, the vegetables that you have, free of any water. But you're running into a different area. That's the area of boreh, whether you can remove pits or that which you do not want from that which you do want, right? Let's say you have a fly falling into your bowl of soup. What do you do? See, and that's a big problem. Right? Now, if you were in China, they would tell you just eat the whole thing, right? But we don't eat bugs here. Right? So you have to know how to remove that bug, so it should not be called boreh. Okay, the last items are also quite important. How do you deal with a wet table, a wet floor, something still from the refrigerator? You want to clean it up. Now, if you're going to take a towel to dry it up, make sure that the towel or the rag, the smartut, is not small, that it's big, that it can absorb all of that water. Because if it's small, you may come to do something that's called shrita. You may come to squeezing out the water from this towel. And that you may run into two problems. If it's clear water, clear liquid, there are two problems with expressing or squeezing or wringing the towel. One problem is the dash, and if it's clear water or clean liquid, it can also be melaben. Melaben means to clean. You're not allowed to clean, right? You're not allowed to clean. You're not allowed to do your laundry on Shabbat. So when we talk about melaben, we'll talk about this again. But here, the immediate problem is the sechita. So therefore, you can't use a sponge either, because a sponge can very easily come to squeeze. So if you want to absorb some liquid, use a big towel. Or there are some that permit those sponges that have a handle? There are certain sponges that have a handle. If you do it very lightly, you just clean up a small seal, it's okay. But you have to be very careful that you do not squeeze it or press it too hard, because you may come to sehita, which is asur. So therefore, sehita, whether it's from any material or from the sponge, is not permissible. And one has to be careful on Shabbat with that. There are quite a few occasions where that may come to play. One of them is with baby wipes. Anybody who has had babies knows what baby wipes are. Baby wipes are little tissues that are damp. You close it and it contains the dampness, and as soon as you take one out, it's always damp. And it's good to clean the babies. The problem is there's a question on whether one is doing sechita while pressing or cleaning the baby with it. According to some manufacturers, the wetness or the dampness is not inside, it's on the surface. Therefore, nothing is really coming out. It's like you're just applying some liquid and wiping it. Some say no, that some of the fibers, at least, do contain some of the liquid. So you have to be careful. It's best not to use them on Shabbat, unless there's a lot of dirt, of course. Then if you use it lightly, and you don't squeeze, you're careful not to press too hard, then it will be also permissible to use the baby wipes. Sometimes babies do get very, very dirty, and you may need to use water, paper. So it's best not to wet the paper, because the paper can easily become sehita. It's best to apply the water first, and then use the paper to clean up. The last item is rituk kera. There's a question in halakha, and anybody that learns Hot Shabbat comes across it occasionally. Are you allowed to make ice cubes on Shabbat? Are you allowed to melt ice cubes on Shabbat? Are you allowed to crush ice? These are questions that come about because of opinions that say that they resemble something. We hold that there's no problem with making ice cubes on Shabbat. You can make ice cubes on Shabbat, with just putting water into the freezer. You can take out and defrost the ice, put the ice cubes into your cup. There's more of a problem if you just leave the ice to melt, because all you want is the water. You follow me? It's similar to dash. All you want is the water. You want it to melt, and you put it close to the heat, so you're transforming this ice into water. So some call it a problem. So it's best not to defrost the ice cubes if your intention is just to get the liquid from it. But if all you want to do is to cool the tea, as long as the tea is not as long as it's not boiling water, because then you're boiling the tea, the ice, right? Or as long as you want to have a cold drink, it's okay to put it and let the ice melt. That's not a problem. The one that is, however, an issue is risuk, sheleg or risuk kera, which means to crush. You cannot crush ice. No, you could. But it's best not to allow it to just melt for that purpose, because some say it resembles this too. And there is an opinion like that. I'm not saying that we are strict by that. I'm just making you familiar with what some of the issues are that we take for granted, but they may be a problem. To just take something out of the freezer and thaw it, it's usually not a problem, especially if you have guests. You need more orange. You know how they frozen orange juice, So it's okay, it's not a problem. But the last issue, the last point of Risuk, that you have to be careful with, not crushing it, because that is a transformation of what the thing was originally, and that should be avoided. Another area that one needs to be careful with, even though it's not as strict, is squeezing your hair. There's no prohibition to wash your hair. You can't wash your entire body on Shabbat, but to wash your hair is not a problem, just like to wash your hands and your face is not a problem on Shabbat. Yeah. However, you should not squeeze your hair. And women who have long hair, no, you can't wash your entire body. Right? We don't take showers. We don't take baths unless you're entering the mikveh, which is for mitzvah. It's permissible, and even then you have to be careful with the towel. Right? You should not come to sahita. Right? So there's problems with towels. But with the se'ar, with the hair, it's not a real sahita. It's not a real squeezing. But nevertheless, you should be careful not to do it because it resembles. The same thing with toothbrushes. We're going to learn about toothpaste that you should not use on Shabbat, especially if you use it on the toothbrush. But if you just want to use the toothbrush itself, as long as it's not the teeth or the toothbrush do not absorb water, then it does not cause sahita. Most of them are right. At fasting, they do not absorb, so it's not a problem. Yeah, go ahead. Right. Combing is a whole different problem. You want to be careful with combing. Yeah. Right. With combing, you have to be very careful, because if you're using a hard brush, then you may be pulling hair. So that's a very good point that you raised. And that is not allowed. Even though you don't intend to do it, it may happen. Remember last week we spoke about the point that if something you don't intend to do, but it's going to happen for sure, you can't do it. Right? So there's a good chance it will happen, that you may be tearing off a hair, use your comb. But if the comb is a soft comb, right, so it's not a problem. Yeah. Some say you should not use it. Some say, we're just about that, some say that you should not use shampoo on the hair either. Yeah. Why? No, because of a similar problem with this too. Because of the lathering. Because you want to moisten that. Some people have very dry hair or dry scalp, and they want to moisten it. There's no problem with it. But if you have long hair, you have to just be careful with the sahita. Some say that the shampoo, hard soap is a separate problem. We'll talk about hard soap, using regular soap at another time. But liquid soap is not a problem. And shampoo should also not be a problem. The shampoo on the hair, the lathering effect may be similar to this. It may be a problem too. So it's best just to wait a couple more hours until Motzei Shabbat. Like this, you avoid all the problems. Yeah.
You wash the body, but you actually get this kind of wash the sweating, the face.
Yeah, with cold water. Right. That's not a problem. Yeah. Okay, I think we're done with about everything here. Yeah. No, so we'll talk about that. The issues of swimming, or the issues of going into the river, or the lake, or a shower. There's separate problems over there. Yeah. Right. Right. To do what? Into his office? Well, what's the problem? Oh, that's a really different story. Yeah. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk about how to do business. Shabbat, you cannot do business either. If somebody has a shop and somebody has a business, especially if he has a partner who's not Jewish, how does he handle the whole situation? That's one of the most trickiest areas in Shabbat. But if you have true emunah, bitachon, and faith in Hashem, and you know that the parnasah comes from him, and that he has already decided how much you're going to make, then you shouldn't have any worries or concerns about working on Shabbat. Because any profit that you make from Shabbat, there's no blessing on it. Right. So therefore, if the other individual needs to, for whatever reason, because he's involved, he's looking for a way that would allow this to continue, he has to consult with the rabbi on how to permit it. Yeah. So I can't just, give you the answer in 1 minute. It all depends on the circumstances, the details, and how the arrangement or the partnership has been formed. So there are ways to arrange for it, but it's not simple. Right. That's a problem too. Then, sure. Right, that could be a big problem. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Yeah. Wushim? Yeah, kushim, as opposed to fruit, vegetables that have been pickled, or anything that has absorbed water which is not its own. And you don't want the water, you just want to take the vegetable and squeeze out all the water that's in there. Or you have a piece of meat that has soaked, right? You don't want it. So it's not originally, does not originally belong in that fruit or vegetable or meat. And all you want to do is discard of the oil, the excess water, that's permissible. But you cannot take the pickle and squeeze out the juice and drink the juice. In other words, if you wanted the liquid, that you can't have. But if you want to discard it because it's extra, that's okay. Okay.